Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. As the title says, this is going to be a stream devoted to G9 Mark II, the features, reviewing, and kind of re-demonstrating some of the stuff that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks while we have waited with bated breath for the G9 Mark II to actually begin shipping. And now that it has begun shipping across the globe, if you're in the US, they should be starting to ship once dealers have them in hand, which should be any day now. Yeah, it kind of just made sense to use this time and cover over it and be able to start addressing questions that some of you may have from your hands-on with the camera so far. Throughout this entire broadcast, if you have questions or comments or things that you want to share about experiences with the camera, if you tag at LUMIX USA, it just helps me see them on my side, and we can go through and kind of cover things that maybe I don't already have prepared ready here. What else? I think I'm forgetting something else. Yes, I did ask a question in the chat, because I'm curious what your, kind of most anticipated features are with the G9 Mark II. So let us know in the chat which of those features you're most excited about or most looking forward to. Because I'd love to hear and see, and maybe if there's something brought up there that I might not be covering, we'll dive into it a little bit, and go through that explanation. If you are new to LUMIX Live, these are weekly broadcasts that we do every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, right now, right here on YouTube, where we give you all the opportunity to speak directly to us, the brand, to me, with LUMIX. Troubleshooting, feature demonstration, sometimes we have guests on. It's all devoted to you, the photographers and videographers out there, to hopefully help get you all some more information about how certain things work in the camera, and maybe share a couple cool little tips that you didn't know about with the equipment. Before we dive into the questions and some of the demonstrations and covering with the camera, I have my G9 Mark II hooked up, all ready to go. I want to remind everybody about LUMIX Pro services here in the United States. We have the Red and the Platinum tier available. The Red tier is free, so if you've just picked up your LUMIX camera or you are imminently awaiting for its delivery here in the US, make sure to double check and get yourself registered on LUMIX Pro Services Red. It is free. You just have to go to either the QR code or the link down in the description. That's going to get you your extended 3-year warranty here in the US past the manufacturer's traditional 1 year that's included. It also gives you access to the portal, so should you have any issues or problems, you have a direct access portal to the LUMIX group for service and support. If you're someone who likes a higher level of service and you want that extra backing and kind of peace of mind with your equipment, we do also offer the Platinum tier, which is a paid level service. The Platinum tier gives you everything that the Red tier gives, so that 3-year extended warranty, but on top of it, you're going to get 2-day repairs with next-day shipping both ways, 20% off out of warranty repairs. So if you drop or break or crack a lens or anything like that, you get a discount on the repair for that. You also get access to a member hotline, so if you're someone who prefers to speak over the phone to get service and support, you will have access to that Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 Eastern Standard Time. And then you also get things like annual sensor cleanings, lens calibrations, EVF cleanings, all that kind of stuff if you want to make sure that your equipment is in tip-top shape as you move through the year. So yeah, it's definitely a really cool program. I encourage you to get yourself set up on the Red tier. You also get access to when we're doing events locally to your region, so that if you want to speak to us in person or join us at some of these things, you'll have, kind of be first in line to know about what's going on with that. Second in line will be social media and LUMIX Live here. So let's see here. We've had a couple of comments and stuff come in here. Germany got delivery yesterday and got the camera and just got the camera and walked the menus up and down. All right, Ulrich, awesome to hear. Hap, some recommendations. I'm actually going to go through some of these because these are good things to bring up. So thank you, Hap, for adding the comment there. We will talk about it throughout the stream. Let's see some of the features that people are looking forward to. PDAF, RAW over HDMI. Don't cripple hammer us. So for those who don't know, RAW over HDMI has not been confirmed on the G9 Mark II. I do not have any other information whether it will or won't have it. So yeah. Does a charger come with the G9 Mark II? So yes, the G9 Mark II does have charging. It is charge over USB-C. If you are looking for something like one of these, the external, kind of sled chargers, these do not come with the camera anymore. It's actually the vast majority of cameras on the market and electronics in general are not coming with this accessory itself. So if you do need one of these, it is an accessory that you do have to pick up. The LUMIX one is... What is our part number on our thing here? I have to double check what the part number is. I think it's a BTC part number to get you the information for that. But camera will charge over USB-C. It is 9-volt 3-amp compliant for USB power delivery. And it charges the batteries up pretty quickly. And you can run the camera off an external battery bank as well while you're using it, as long as you have the battery in the camera. Doug, excited to get your G9 Mark II. Your order is in process. That is awesome. Zizo, does any camera offer 9x16 guides? Yeah, that is actually one of the things we're going to talk about. The G9 Mark II, and actually the vast majority of all the recent Lumix releases have guidelines for 9x16 vertical. So yeah, we'll dive in and look at that too. Doug says, looking forward to playing with handheld high resolution. Also the improved AF as I track RC planes for both stills and video. Definitely a big improvement here with the G9 Mark II and the phase hybrid system. I'm going to talk about the AF system actually, and I'll have some recommendations for you, Doug, with faster moving subjects to make sure you're getting the best, fastest performance out of the system for your style of shooting. Can the SSD be used for photography as well as video? Yes, it can. In fact, 9 out of 10 times I'm using SSDs for photo storage on this camera, so we'll talk about that as well. Michael says, I know you went over focus stacking last time, but could you give us a more in-depth explanation of the settings and what they exactly mean? Yep, we are going to talk about the focus bracketing that we do in the camera and how it interacts with flashes. John, does the G9 Mark II have anti-flicker for stills? I believe it does. It's actually a good question. I rarely ever have to use that mode, but I will, we will go through the menu and take a look at it. Animal, really enjoy the first episode of the Shutter Showdown. Awesome. That is actually a great segue before we continue the questions and dive into the demos here. I encourage you all to go take a look at episode 1 of Lumix Presents Shutter Showdown. It went live last Friday. It was a super exciting project to be a part of, super exciting project to be on site with while they were actually, Armando and Dylan and Matthew and Fritz were out there creating. So I highly encourage you to go take a look at the episode, watch it. They are a little bit longer. They are about 45 minutes because it was filmed in the vein of an actual television style release. So a little bit longer, but I highly encourage you, grab a snack, grab some something to drink, hang out, watch it on a TV through the YouTube app, and let us know in the comments as we go through these next couple of episodes who you thought did the best in the comments below those videos. It was such a cool project, and I'm hoping we can do a lot more of them like that. John says, stills anti-flicker would really help with LED variable bright color in sporting events. Yes. Have to double check. Anti-flicker is definitely way more valuable in electronic shutter than it is in mechanical, but I will go through the menu in a few minutes and we'll go through with that because I know exactly what you're talking about with banding and stuff like that. Hap says, will we get an AF manual like we got for the G9? So the manuals that exist already for the existing cameras, G9, the S5 series cameras, the ones that we already have online, they are 100% compatible with this camera. The only thing that's different as far as the way to think about it is that this is using PDAF as the base, so it's going to respond a lot faster. So if you look at things, and like I said, I know I'm alluding a lot to what we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but when you look at the adjustments that you can make under each of the AF custom settings, they're more noticeable in how aggressive the changes are between each step on this system because it inherently runs a lot faster. So you definitely want to, kind of use those guidebooks that we already have out. They're 100% identical for this. I think we'll update it just to point out that it's relevant to this camera, but they are straight up relevant to this camera. Looking forward to Leica monochrome. Would love to see it on the GH6. Yeah, the Leica monochrome is a pretty sick color profile. Awesome color profile. I love shooting in that. And then the last one we'll take before we start diving into this stuff here with the camera. Hey Sean, thanks for answering my questions about the new DJI Mic 2 and Bluetooth latency last week. Can you confirm if the S5 Mark II and G9 Mark II have the required Bluetooth hardware or not? So no, modern cameras across the board, at least as far as I've looked, so apologize if maybe there's one out there and I've missed it. Modern interchangeable lens cameras from all the major manufacturers do not have the hardware support for low latency Bluetooth audio. That's an entire chipset addition that would have to be done on the cameras. What I can tell you is that it is something that we've brought up to our engineers, and we've gone back and forth with, okay, is this possible? What's required to do it? Is it something that will require a new camera to be able to do it because it is hardware based? So that kind of stuff is being looked into now that it's becoming more and more attainable at a reasonable price from, reliable companies. And working with the various different kind of standards that are out there for low latency with audio. And that would apply to audio monitoring as well as audio capture. Realistically, from a practical standpoint, I do not think you're going to see Bluetooth audio capture on cameras anytime soon. Monitoring, maybe. But probably still a little while out for that kind of stuff, because everything I understand is that it is a hardware addition that would have to be made to the cameras, and they would have to be designed from day one to support it. So, let's see here. In Germany, normal, there's a black screen after taking a picture, no matter if it's taking electronic, mechanical, not in burst mode. That can depend on your preview settings, Dieter. It'll depend on what you've got for playback preview after you take the picture. So, all right. So let's talk about the camera in general. So, as we were saying, now that the cameras are starting to ship, let me make sure I got all my lights on here. Now, as the cameras are starting to ship, this is there's a lot in this camera that may be brand new to some of you, maybe a little old hat for others. Or maybe just things that you've not ever really kind of thought about how to set up with these cameras and really maximize what you can get out of this as a tool for you. So one of the first things that I want to talk about here is actually related to the autofocus, because as I forget exactly who said it, I know is just as Doug pointed out before, tracking RC planes and stuff like that. So with our system, in the LUMIX ecosystem, the autofocusing system is designed out of the box as a general use autofocus system. So what does that mean, right? The autofocus tuning that is out of the box is meant for casual use cases where, you just want to kind of take it. It does pretty good at pretty much anything that you throw in front of it as far as the subject matter that you want to photograph or create a video of. If you're vlogging, it's going to be really reliable. If you're doing things like I do here for LUMIX Live, it's going to be very reliable for that. But when you start getting into some of the more specialized activities, so sports photography, wildlife photography, fast-paced tracking, things like that, that's where if you just take the camera out of the box and just go right into shooting with it, you may find yourself slightly underwhelmed. And that's going to be common across the board for pretty much any camera. There's a level of tuning that you can do because one, AF speed, sensitivity, stuff like that is not going to be a one-size-fits-all for everybody. So the way we address that as LUMIX is we add the ability of AF custom sets for photo, and then AF custom settings for video use cases. And we've talked about these before, but when you go into these particular modes, you'll see that by default, the camera is set up as set 1. That's how it is out of the box. Set 1 is a very generic setting, so you'll see everything's pretty, it's all zeroed out. Moving subject prediction is bumped up a little bit. to the +1 setup, because that's a relatively middle of the road option for, how aggressive is it going to look and track a subject that's, kind of changing directions often. But what this means is that if you're going to photograph things, and I'll use a couple of scenarios. If you're going to photograph, say, kids, like your family, you got little ones running around and you want to capture them just, having a good day kind of thing. Out of the box, you're probably going to want to come in here and say, hey, I want to actually set this to a different AF custom settings option. And it's going to come down to the descriptions that we put into these defaults that come out of the camera. So think of the scenario that you're going to photograph with and think of what's the motion look like. Kids, very unpredictable, especially if it's casual, running around, changing direction, running, walking, all that kind of stuff, right? So in a case like that, this is where, as you read through the sets that we have, set 3 is designed and recommended for situations where your subject is moving randomly. Other objects may be in the scene, so, they may be running behind, a coffee table, or if they're outside in a park, they may be running behind a tree and then coming out and back and, from the tree, things like that. So being able to come in and say, hey, I know that my subject's going to move rapidly and relatively erratically, so randomly. Set your camera up with set 3 for that kind of scenario. If you're doing things like, I think it was Doug had said, like RC planes, or I relate that very closely to the motorcycle photography that I do, that those subjects are either going to be moving in a singular direction and they're going to be moving fast to where they're going to come towards you, maybe across frame. So that's a little bit more of a known path that they may fly. They may be erratic, in which case then you've got set 3 for that. But this is where things like set 4 will be a nice advantage, because this is where the speed of your subjects can change significantly. So motorcycles, the good example here is that I photograph a lot of motorcycles through a kind of sweeping corner down here in Austin, and they enter at a little bit of a slower speed, and then they accelerate as they're going out. So you have a fast, rapid change in speed. So being able to come in here and say, hey, I want the cameras to be prioritizing that fast, almost instantaneous change in speed, means that now the system's looking for that kind of action. It's going to move and respond more aggressively for that kind of shooting, which means your hit rate's going to go up, especially in the photography side. The other thing that you can do for, say, like the RC planes, if it's in flight, this is where set 2 can be a really big advantage, because if you're tracking them and you're not really having fast changes in speed, set 2 can be a really good tool to make sure and tune the autofocusing system so that it's better balanced for what your style of shooting is. So again, as a recap, set 1, default out of the box, good for the vast majority of things. Not really the greatest at specialized kind of photography. Sports, wildlife, fast action. Set 2, really designed for objects and subjects that are moving at a constant speed in a constant direction. So we use the examples, trains, airplanes, RC cars. Technically, this will also work well for motorcycles, cars, things like that, where, maybe they're moving in a singular direction. Set 3, we use football, basketball, soccer, if you're in the US, as the kind of demonstration, because there's going to be multiple different subjects. They're moving in and out behind, in front and behind of various other objects and subjects. So this system is designed where it's a little more aggressive with the motion subject prediction to stay with that subject that you've picked. And then set 4 is car racing, motocross, motorsports, motorcycles, things like that, where you have fast changes in speed and potentially in direction as well, because that moving subject prediction is also dialed up there. So definitely take a look at these if you're in the photography side, because they're going to help you pretty drastically. My day in, day out set on my particular camera, which the camera that I've got plugged in is my daily driver right now. I am usually either in set 4 or set 3, even for my general day-to-day shooting, because it's what works best for me. I know it sounds like a cop-out. I encourage you to test each of these, play around with them as you get the camera, and these are found on our other cameras as well. play around with them, see which one is giving you the results that works best for your shooting style. Because like I said, no autofocus system, I don't care who makes it, is going to be the best solution for everybody right out of the box. That's why companies give you some tuning control over how the systems work. Now, before I jump back to the questions, I want to address the video side of this. Now, in video, we also have AF custom settings for video. The difference here is that these aren't presets built into this camera. We have the options of changing AF speed and AF sensitivity within our system. And what these do is AF speed is how fast do you want the AF speed to be from point-to-point acquisition. There's a lot of times where PDAF systems can like snap to focus, and that may be jarring depending on what you're trying to film. If you're trying to make sure that you get, a fast but smooth transition through the motion, you may want to play around and dial this in a little bit to your particular style. And then AF sensitivity, this is how tenacious you want the system to lock on to the subject that you've got selected. So if I am, filming a singular person and there's a group of people or there's a tree that, they're going to walk behind or something along those lines, this is where you can tell the camera to actually stay more on the subject and resist wanting to change subject. A little bit more strong than it would necessarily out of the box. When you move this to the plus side, it means that the system's going to be ready to jump and change. So if you have this set and say a person walks behind a tree, the system may jump to the tree and then jump back to the person. Where if you set this to negative, it's going to resist going to that tree unless they hang there for a long enough period of time. But you'll have the subject move behind the tree. It'll stay on this focal plane and then catch the subject on the exiting side of the tree in that particular example. So play around with each of these because you're going to find that you may come into a situation where you prefer a very specific style and look. And PDAF, if you're not coming from a system with PDAF, can be a little jarring. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it can be a little jarring if you're used to maybe a little bit slower, not slower, but smooth transitions in and out of focus. If you want it to look closer to your focus pulling something, PDAF is great. It's really awesome at jumping in and out of focus to get a subject where you want it to be. But there are times where your choice for stylistic effect of the focus, you would want it dialed back down. So you have all of that control on the G9 Mark II, as well as the S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, S5, S1H, S1R, S1, all those cameras. Even on the GH6. Let's see here. Please give us a new Leica monochrome on the S5 II. I would love to have Leica monochrome on the other cameras. I don't know if or when it's going to come to those cameras, so sorry. Eric, good to see you as always. Good to see you too here. Have the LUMIX photo contest winners been announced? Don't recall seeing a date. It's a good question. I don't know. It's a slightly different group than me, so I will have to check in with those guys. Animal says, any update about the maximum and base ISO and different picture profiles and frame rates? Yes. So, with, let me go into here. So, right now, I've got the camera set up. I'm in the photo mode. These are going to be the same in the video mode, for your different, ISO values. So, as far as maximum ISO values go, maximum ISO values are going to be the same, depending on the overall system here. So you've got 25,600 as your max ISO. You can enable extended ISO and get down to 50 on the low end. I do not recommend it typically. While yes, you can theoretically get cleaner looking images at 50 ISO, you are giving up highlight dynamic range when you do that for most cases. So it'll be 100 to 25,600. If I change my color profile here to, let's go to Vlog. When I come in here and I go into my ISO values, you'll see that your base ISO for Vlog, or your low range ISO, is 500. Again, you can turn on extended ISO, and that will give you the ability to drop down to 125 ISO. But again, remember, this is going to be clipping your highlight information when you do this. So think carefully when you want to change some of those values and utilize them. I've always been of the strong stance that it is better to screw on an ND filter at 500 ISO than it is to not use an ND filter and drop down to 125, because I would much rather have my highlights saved. As far as upper ISO for Vlog, you're at 12,800 is the highest ISO value that we offer when you're shooting in Vlog. If we change this to Rec 709, which is going to be the same as any of the standard color profiles, this is where, again, you're going to see you can go up to 25,600 all the way down to 100. Your extended ISO value is not available in this particular mode. And then if we go into Cinelike D2, Cinelike D2 and V2 are going to be the same for the ISO values. So now if I go in here, you'll see that I have 100 as my low range, and I have access to that 50 ISO as well. And then again, all the way up to 25,600. So anything outside of Vlog, you'll have 100 to 25,600. The only other color profile that would potentially change this, and let me see if I can get it to show up on this with HDMI out. The only other color profile that may change this is if I go to Hybrid Log Gamma. Hybrid Log Gamma, this is the direct to output encoded footage. Your base ISO value is 250. And your highest value is 12,800. So hopefully that helps and gets you the information there for the ISO values. And I will make sure that when I go back through and timestamp this video that I have that clearly laid out. So let's take a look. A bunch of other questions and comments came in here. Where are we? Martin says, okay, one of two. I would like to make a suggestion for a super useful new feature for all cameras. Add support for Xbox controllers over USB port. Use as remote shutter, focus, pull, FN buttons. 2, camera could send back haptic feedback to the operator using vibration. There's a headset mic jack on the gamepad that could be used to provide 3 or 4 channel audio input. In addition, you could buy an Xbox controller version for PC that comes with wireless dongle. It makes it wireless without messing with camera Bluetooth radio, but it's optional. Interesting idea. I can pretty much guarantee that's not possible, at least in the current layout of the way cameras interact. The USB ports on these cameras, while they have P2P control, so like with the tether programs and stuff like that, though that's a whole separate level of programming that would have to be done, which means that the processors would also have to be designed closer in language that the controller is going to be able to work with, and vice versa. The camera's got to be able to recognize it. Cool idea. Definitely pass the kind of suggestion up. Realistically, just to set the expectation, realistically, even if it was possible, you're quite a ways out from that being added in as support in a modern camera. I can see some areas where it could be really useful. Suppose future me brings both GH6 and G9 Mark II for event and wedding, event, photo, and video shoots. It's ironic that I would use the G9 Mark II for video PDAF and the GH6 for photos, which takes great photos. Yeah, the GH6 is still going to be the better tool for long-form recording, hands down. You're not going to have to even remotely think about thermals or anything like that because that camera's designed for it. If you need things like timecode, if you need... if you want to shoot ProRes, but you don't want to have external SSDs, that GH6 is going to outperform the G9 Mark II. In that case, since you'd have to go to external SSDs on the G9 Mark II to get full use of the ProRes features. But yeah, I mean, both of them are going to pair really well with each other, especially image quality wise. So, Chad says, when is the actual release date of the G9 Mark II? A pre-order from Best Buy and haven't seen any updates yet. The shipping from the dealer is going to depend on when the dealer has the inventory in their warehouse, processes it, and then gets into their shipping steps. My understanding is that we are already fulfilling our dealers for inventory. So now it is straight up to the dealers getting them in, getting them processed, and then out to you. My guess is that knowing that I think some dealers in the U.S. have already been able to get through that process and get their inventory on their website, you should start seeing movement beginning of next week would be my best guess. Possibly even tomorrow. It depends on how fast that dealer is. So, how about different frame rates? I heard from Casey that ISO 3200 was max he could use in either 5.7K 60 or 4K 20. Not sure which one. It's a good question. I didn't think there was a limitation on frame rate for ISO values. So let's see if I can break my switch here. So if we go to movie, and of course this is gonna, yep, that's what I figured. When I change modes, the what am I using? The A10 Mini does not like when I change modes for this. So there we go. Activate. Thank you. All right, so let's set this to 4K 120. That's full HD. Let's go up to, is it gonna let me do 4K 120? I can't remember. I think it does. Or let's just do 5.7K 60p. Here we go. Get it up. Again, thank you, Blackmagic. You don't know what to do with the output that I'm sending you. Now we're fixed. All right, so we're at 5.7K 60p. ISO value, 12,800 in hybrid log gamma. If I change this to, let's change this to monochrome. If I go to my ISO values, 12,800. So video recording, 12,800 will be your highest ISO value. Your low values are going to change based on the same information that we had before. So 12,800, that'll be the highest you can go for the video recording options there. Let's see, a couple of the other comments here. Can you please confirm if G9 Mark II supports 5.7K 16 by 9 or 17 by 9 in 60 frames per second? 17 by 9, 5.7K 60p recording right here in 420 10-bit 300 megabits per second. You also have 48 frame, and then the 5.8K is the open gate recording options here. You will have 4.4K if you want to do 60 frames per second for a 4:3 aspect ratio footage as well. So, hi from Park City, Utah. Can you help me understand what phase detect autofocus does for me? Also planning to take the new G9 Mark II to Antarctica this winter. Anything I need to be aware of? So, phase hybrid or phase detect autofocus, what it is it's a different method of autofocus technology, right? So it means that there are phase difference being measured on the sensor through pixels. In our case, we use 779 of them. So it will look and say, hey, this subject here, these 2 pixels are watching it, and it's measuring the distance values. This is a very rudimentary explanation, so you know, don't hate on me too much for this stuff. It will look at that point and then measure the distance between those 2 pixels, or the difference between those 2 pixels, to know, okay, hey, this point is here. That's exactly how much it needs to move. It gives the system a very fast response for distance information. The way phase hybrid systems work, and the way basically all phase systems work in mirrorless cameras these days, is the phase information is provided into the processor. It knows the distance that it has to move, so that will initiate the move of the elements in the lens. Once it gets very close to where the system's telling it that phase is, or the object is in phase, that's when the contrast systems take over. Contrast systems then decelerate the autofocusing to land at the point that was determined. And then on top of all of this, that's where your subject detections are being run. All your subject detections are doing are telling the system which phase pixels to use and where to prioritize it. The subject detection areas are also fully within the contrast side of the autofocusing solution. There is no phase added benefit for the for subject detection because that's a visual part of the medium. So that information gets fed in. It tells the system, hey, use this pixel for focusing. That's where I want to go. And then it will run and follow the rest of the system that way. So hopefully that helps. Let's see here. Can you explain about the functions where you can switch from closer to further subjects? Yeah, sure. So I'm going to put this back into photo mode for this particular explanation. So in our cameras, we have a system called near and far focus. This was shown, I think, on a couple of the YouTubers out there. The wildlife guys, I think, or wildlife photographers, I think, have latched on to this kind of setup. But the way our system works is we have the ability to program in function buttons. And what's cool is the G9 Mark II has a function button in the front that you can program in with this. It has two of them on the front two of them on the front if you want to utilize this. But if you go into setting up your custom function buttons, and I'll go to those front two, I can select here, I want to change, where my system is prioritizing to look first for focus. PDAF systems, this isn't as needed because the systems have a much faster approach at determining where the focus is, but there are situations with PDAF systems where, say, you're shooting through a plexiglass window that's not necessarily the cleanest, or you're shooting through a dirty windscreen, or you're photographing out through a screen door. Those are all scenarios that will trip up a PDAF system. It'll trip up any autofocusing system because there is an object there between you and the subject you may want to focus on. So we added in AF on near and AF on far. So if I go back in here and let me pull AF on far. So what this does with our system is this tells the camera, hey, I want you to start looking from the far extent first if I set this up on AF on far. Analyze far end first and bring towards me. This means that shooting through that screen door, this means shooting through, say a scratched up plexi window, whatever kind of scenario you want, where there's an object between you and your subject. This means that it's going to ignore everything that's close, or anything that comes up as, close distance in the phase calculations. Go out and grab the subject much faster. So this can be a nice choice to get yourself much faster acquisition. The other thing that can happen here is the AF near. AF near, if you're photographing something that, say, is a relatively smaller subject, or it's a scenario where the object that you're photographing is harder to determine against the background, especially if you're using subject detection, or maybe it's a little more camouflaged. This is where AF on will tell the system, hey, look forward, closest focus out from the camera. So you'll be able to make sure that you can grab that point there. Now, AF on near is a little less commonly needed because PDAF systems are going to be real quick to do this. In a case like that where it will be a little bit faster for you in the long run is if you're jumping from a subject that you're focusing on really far out, and the next subject you want to focus on is really, really close, like very close to the close focus distance. This is a way that you can make the system run faster and work in your benefit versus just letting the system do its own thing, and maybe it takes a split second longer when you're not doing this versus you want to make sure and understand the tool that you have and everything to your disposal to make it happen even faster. So let's see here. Hopefully that answered your question for near and far focus. Let's see here. FC says, just my opinion. I find turning down noise reduction to -5 gives better image quality JPEG and compressed video than 0. I can choose to noise reduce in post. Yes, so this is a good segue into Hap's question. I'm sorry, I'm shortening your name there. So one of the comments in the beginning of the stream was recommendations. It said dial down JPEG noise reduction in future firmware updates. The truth is, we're not going to do that. We're not going to change the default noise reduction for JPEG processing because that's a very personal choice. Personally, I like the way the JPEGs come out. I like the tonality I get out of them. I have no problem with the noise, with the way that the image looks. So it's perfectly fine. And that's going to be a totally different response than maybe you have. So what we do in our cameras, again, because we really prioritize making sure that you have the ability to change everything in this camera, when you go into, let me do that slower. When you go into the menu, so in this case, I'm going into the photo menu, go into image quality 1 and then photo styles. I can go into this photo style, and as I scroll down, you'll see that I have control over contrast for this profile, highlight, shadow, color tone. If I want to add filters to this, so I have a red and a blue light facing on this, so I can do the additive and subtractive things for the filters. But then when I go down further, you'll see I have sharpness and noise reduction. So I have the ability to come in and change the noise reduction intensity per color profile for your particular style. So like was said, in the Leica monochrome profile that I'm using here, I actually prefer taking noise reduction all the way down, and I actually add our grain effect to this under low, because I like that little bit more crunchy look in the JPEGs. And that's the kind of big thing about this, is that you have the full level of control over the JPEG engine that comes out in this camera. Now, you can't turn noise reduction completely off, but you can turn it off to, or you can turn it down to where it's near completely off. Once you make a change in here and you save it, what you'll see is that when I come in and I look at the color profile, so I can do this. So if you look at my selection here in the quick menu for Leica monochrome, there's now an asterisk on that particular profile. That tells me visually I made a change to this profile. This is not how it's shipped by default. So I will know quickly as I'm going through this, hey, I know I made a change to that. If I go to the other monochrome profiles, I didn't make any changes. If I go into portrait, landscape, standard, vivid, all that stuff, I didn't make any changes to those profiles because I personally like the way they look. But yeah, you have that full control over how you want the JPEGs to be processed. And this is also possible in post after you've taken an image. When you go into the playback menu, you can do raw processing in the camera and change how the processing was done. The second part of that was you want burst rate options to limit total number of RAWs taken. That's definitely something that we can bring up to the engineering team to see, you know, what would work if there's a way to do that. Cold startup time. The cold startup time has been documented very clearly through many of our streams. That is a direct response to what the community has said about battery consumption when the cameras are in basically an off state. I've had the G9 Mark II for, since June of this year, working with our teams on this. I do not ever have a problem with this camera when I let it sit on my desk and I move to a different camera for a couple of weeks, having any kind of battery drain or parasitic draw when the camera's just sitting on my shelf with a fully charged battery in it. Will I come back and is it maybe a hair lower than it was before? Yeah, all cameras will, but not anything that's ever a problem with it. The other thing is that with cameras now, because I can just carry a battery bank with me when I'm moving from spot to spot, I'll just plug the camera in while I'm moving from location, and it tops the battery off while I'm on the way. So, and then the fourth part of your question or comment was return photo modes from the G9. I'm curious what photo modes you want to see added in. Let us know. Let's see here. A couple other questions that came up here. Also, I love the way classic film grain looks in with noise in the picture profiles rather than noise reduced distortion. Oh, okay. Let's continue of your question or comment there, FC. All right. Kudo, is it true if you downscale a high-res 420 into an HD form, it becomes 422? No, that is not true. Yeah, that does not. You can't create color information that's not there. 420 to 422, it's still 420 footage. What you do gain is, because you are downscaling, you are getting better detail. So you are filling in and changing the resolution through that. Does it actually become 422? Not really. But it can give you the same general layout of it. Because you're taking what was a larger image and then shrinking it down, so it inherently gets sharper. So you're getting a sharper looking image because you're just squishing things down. And that is also, the downscaling is going to come down to what you choose to use for downscaling. If you're in the photography side, there are many ways that you can have Photoshop interpret the pixels as you downscale, and some are better than others. In video, it's a much more complicated process. So yeah, but it's not actually giving you 422 color. It's better than, like, it's so hard to describe. It's a big benefit, and often, like for anything that I record, I shoot in 5.8K open gate on all the cameras, or 6K open gate if I'm on the S series, and I'm putting it into Premiere as my work choice. And I am exporting out. I'm working on a higher a 4K timeline with that footage, and I'm scaling everything as I go out. So, is there any way to set up global lock unlock for all buttons operating to prevent accidental changes when handling? Yes, there actually is. So on the Lumix cameras, you'll see under the custom settings here, there's an operation lock setup. Operation lock here is a custom function button that you will have to click on the setup. And in this case, I can select to say cursor, joystick, touchscreen, dials, and display button. Say I want to have all of those things locked. Well, then I go to function buttons, come in here, and you have to pick one that's not part of what you're telling it to lock, because otherwise you will, kind of lock the entire thing here. So I'm going to change my AF on button here, because say I personally don't do back button focus anymore. So I will come through here, and I want to look for AF, or I want to look for Operation Lock in the menu, and I honestly forget exactly where it is, because there are so many things that we can custom function on this. So there it is, Operation Lock. This is also accessible by pressing and holding the button that you want to have us reassigned. As long as it's not a button designed for press and hold, it'll drop you right in this menu. So now I have Operation Lock selected on my AF on button. So now if I press AF on, you'll see you get a notice on the screen. It says Operation Lock. If I try to turn the rear dial, the front dial, it's telling me operation is locked. I want to turn the rear thing. I want to press the display button. All of those options are locked until I press the AF on button. Now operation's unlocked, and I can change all my settings again. So hopefully that helps. Andrew, I purchased a 14-to-140 f4 to 5.8 OIS in 2012 with Mega OIS. Can you give me an idea of what IS features may not be available if paired with the G9 Mark II? Is it possible to update firmware? So the 14-to-140, that generation of the 14-to-140 is, I believe, dual IS 1. So all of the features that we have in the camera are 100% going to work with that lens. What is going to be different between that lens and the much newer lenses is how strong your effective stabilization is, especially when you get to the 140 range. So you're not losing anything with that lens on the camera. And you can always check our firmware update site. You want to make sure that you match the part number on the back of the lens to the lenses on the firmware update site. But yeah, feature-wise, Andrew, you're not going to lose anything feature-wise. It's just may not be as effective for stabilization strength in the longer telephoto range, because that's where dual IS pairs the lens and the sensor stabilization. The better the stabilization in the lens is, because of the newer series, the more effective range you're going to hold that 8 stops out to the telephoto range. Let's see here. Where we go? I want this camera so badly, but figure it's too much camera for this 75-year-old grandma, both tech-wise and size. I have an onboard Micro Four Thirds from the get-go. I have a G1 and G5. Oh, Lois, no. This camera is so much fun to use. I highly encourage you, if you have the opportunity and if there are retailers near you that have the equipment, get your hands on it. Play around with it. Looking at spec lists online for weight, size, all that kind of stuff, it is very deceiving until you can get yourself in and get hands-on with the camera. I have relatively larger hands, and to me, this is a small camera to me. Even the S5 II is a small camera, because the way I hold the camera, I tend to end up still having my pinky hang underneath this camera. So I am often running a battery grip on mine. Weight-wise, carrying this thing around, if I take all of the stuff that I have in my pockets throughout the day, I carry 2 phones. I have one work phone and one personal phone. These 2 phones weigh more than the body, holding them side by side. These definitely weigh more than this. Putting a lens on it, a nice strap. I use the Peak Design, the slide straps with it. I never noticed that I have this with me, and depending on the lenses that you like to use, it's a fun system to shoot with. So, I definitely do not think that it's too much camera for people. It is a system designed so that you can expand on it. You can use as many of the features as you like, or you can use the core ones that you like. Especially coming from a photographer, knowing how video-centric our brand is and has always been, I rarely use the video features outside of what I do for work. None of my personal work is video. It's all photo-based, so yeah. Let's see here. I have one question I haven't found an answer. Does the G9II require a dummy battery when recording heaviest codecs on SSD, or does it just burn through the battery faster? So, if you want to record the higher quality stuff like ProRes or anything out to SSD, if you want to go above 60 frames per second, the camera is set up to use the internal battery. However, you can use an external dummy battery for it. Our formal specification is that you need to use the DMW10 and the DCC17, I believe it is, the one for the BLK22, because of the way the pins work and the power that's being delivered to the camera. With that, you get access to higher frame rates, over 60p, out to SSD. That's the same on a GH6. We added that to the GH6 a little while ago. So you can do it. I cannot tell you how you can make the other ones work to do this. But you would want to look and see how our DCC17 and AC10 are rigged up. Matt and I have, as I see Matt's here, Matt and I have done it, and yes, it does work. The whole situation with SSD is that it requires more power, as Matt said, than the battery can typically provide over 60 frames per second. So when you go over 60 frames per second, that's why you have to go to a dummy battery style power solution. Even USB-C doesn't provide enough power because that's a heat generating point as well. Martin, could you please explain what the limitations of the old versions with PDAF 12 to 35, 35 to 100 had their Mark III released to support PDAF, but not a lot of info was shared. Why? You're not going to have a problem with the older lenses. Speed and focus performance-wise, I haven't found any major difference between the two. The core differences that you will see with the 12 to 35, 35 to 100, and actually not, it's just those two, is that the newer lenses are designed to also have the hardware required to support zooming while focusing. The original 12 to 35, 35 to 100, all the way up to the Mark IIs, technically up to the Mark III, did not have that capability. The new Leica versions of them added that as the hardware capable change to it. But yeah, otherwise, as far as PDAF goes and just the inherent being fast enough to focus with the system, the existing Micro Four Thirds lenses from LUMIX, they're perfectly fine. Because what you also have to remember is our optics were engineered to work with a system that was more demanding on the focusing system. They had to move a lot faster. They had to move a lot more often. PDAF actually is easier for us to run than the contrast DFD system was on the hardware that the lenses are being used with. It's also why our company has also had some of the most forward-thinking thought on focus motors to be used. We switched to using linear autofocus motors a long time ago in a lot of our lenses, and many of our optics, especially in the full-frame side, use both linear and stepping motors to expedite and manage the speed required as well as the weight payload that's being moved from the elements. So yeah, you've got no problem with just inherent compatibility with PDAF on our system. Let's see here. Matt actually asking LUMIX directly. Hi, Matt. Says, saw a video talking about using L Classic Neo with real-time LUT to get film grain control and customized look. What do you think? I tested and it works. Yes. We have talked about this before. Real-time LUT, a lot of people have said that they wanted to be able to do the ability to add film grain to your footage. And if I go back into the camera here, I can show you what I'm talking about. When you go into our photo styles, particularly the L Classic Neo photo style, we have grain effect, which we can turn on. This is luminance grain, so this is like what you're going to get for, think film grain. And then we have color noise that you can add on or off. So you can add color noise to this if you wanted. So what Matt is pointing out is that we also have, if I can go to the right menu here, we also have our My Photo Style options here. So say I take My Photo Style 10 and I come down and I change the base photo style that I'm working with to L Classic Neo, and then come down and say I want film grain on standard, and then I want to be able to come in here and say, hey, I want to apply, say, this Kodachrome 1930s LUT to it. Now, this photo style is going to have the grain effect applied, as well as, in this case, the color noise applied. So this gives you a really cool effect to add grain to your particular look, so that now, when I take a picture like this, and actually, let me do this at a 100 ISO so that you actually see what the grain is that's being added. So now when I look at this picture and I zoom in, you'll see that I've got grain added to a 100 ISO image, and it looks really convincing. So say I don't want to use the color noise. I want that off, and I want standard noise here, so everything looks good. But let me also just change the color profile, so because I'm not, for this particular look, and as a reminder, these LUTs are not designed for this particular color profile base that I'm working on. So say I'm working here. So if I come in and I take a quick picture here, and then let's go back in and take a look, you'll see that I get that, I'm adding that grain effect to the image, where if I were to come in here, and then again, we're going to come in and turn grain off, take the same picture, and then review that image, you see I have that like perfectly clean 100 ISO look with the grain added. And you can change the level of that grain that you want on that image. So very cool effect to be able to layer multiple different, kind of styles and looks that you want to add on to your photos when you're working with that. So let's see here. Where did this go? Hi, Sean. Is the option IS always on removed on the G9 Mark II? Is the IS only enabled when you were pressing the shutter button now? Some blogs claimed that keep pressing the button may help IS. So what you are referencing is, where is it in my menu here? So image stabilization. In our in some of our other cameras, like the S1, S1H series, the image stabilization, you had two options. It was either always on or press to activate. That meant that when you were in standby, it wasn't running and floating the sensor. Now it is just always running and floating the sensor, so you don't have to change anything here. The IS system is running. I'm going to double check this because I was fairly certain it was in that menu. IS status scope. Yeah, so stabilization is always active on this camera. It's not like some of the older series were. So, Super Zero, curious exactly how 779 AF points factor CDAF and PDAF, and why not just increase CDAF up a couple of hundred points? CDAF is done in areas, not points. PDAF is done as points because they're pixels on the sensor. So CDAF areas, we still have the CDAF areas that we read for things like motion prediction and all that kind of stuff. And then the PDAF points are what the subject detection is saying that's the point that it goes. Just increasing the areas of CDAF doesn't necessarily actually help because you're shrinking the areas that each individual one works. Battery door grip came off. What glue should I use to glue it back? Don't glue it back. I would send it to a service team to put it back on properly. Yeah, I never recommend using any kind of glue on the cameras to fix anything. I think it's Jens says, for macro, I want to do focus stacking. I want to utilize the video function. Focus move between 3 points. How can I set it up to get precise focus steps? What codec is best? This will depend. So if you're doing focus stacking by taking the video files out of the camera, so say you want to do the open gate recording and then do focus move between points, so that then you can extract the frames from that video to then stack them. You would do that by setting up the focus transition functionality, which is right here in the menu. I did a demonstration on focus transition, I think last week. So I'll link to that. I encourage you to go take a look at that video with the demonstration of how it works, because you can program in 3 specific points and have the focus move through. If you are not doing this in video, okay, no, you say you want to utilize video function to move between 3 points. So yeah, it's going to be doing focus transition. If you're going to do it that way, if you want the highest resolution to work with, that's where in the video side, you'll probably be looking at the 5.8K open gate. In a case like that, 30 frames per second, and you're probably going to want to make sure you're using a fast shutter speed, so ignore everything that someone tells you about what makes proper looking video because you're not using it in that method. That's probably going to get you the best results because it's going to be sharp and fast, and you're going to get the highest resolution for that particular style of shooting. Let's see here. AR says, any chance that we could have in-camera bokeh-rama composition? It would in part make up for lack of super shallow depth of field on micro four thirds. Commented this on another stream recording too. So you mean basically like the compositional kind of concepts that cell phones do? Yeah, you're probably not going to see that kind of stuff in current generations of camera hardware. primarily because that kind of processing requires a lot more power than what cameras have inherently in them. It's kind of like I've said on previous streams that there's this big, kind of keyword being thrown around that cameras have AI in them. They don't. That's not what's in a camera. Cameras don't have AI. They have machine learning algorithms that are AI trained, but your camera itself, I don't care what brand it is. I don't care if it's the latest, newest, greatest thing that just was announced. They don't have AI in them. They don't have the ability to artificially learn on the fly. That's not what the cameras are doing. They have processing for the machine learning algorithms that are programmed into them that an engineer used AI to create. So because of that, some of that kind of processing is going to be very far out when it comes to the current architectures being used within cameras. I would say the comment of lack of super shallow depth of field on Micro Four Thirds is very misleading. That is just not true. You can 100% get super shallow depth of field on Micro Four Thirds. I do it all the time. I encourage you to actually look at the various lenses that are out there and not just judge based on what is said online about quote-unquote equivalency and the people that are probably not actually out there capturing photos with the things that they like to sound like they have doctorates in. So, if you feel triggered by that, sorry, not sorry. Do the existing 10 to 25 and 25 to 50 have capability to focus while zooming? I do not believe they have that yet. I think they will be getting a firmware update, but I'm not 100% sure what you can think of how long firmware update stuff is going to be out there. James says, is Animal Eye AF available in all video frame rates? Do we lose PDAF and switch over to DFD in some frame rates? The subject detection works all the way up to 4K 120. When you switch to 4K 120, that's when your subject detection turns off and you're using standard like AF points. So one area plus, zone, full area, things like that. As far as changing to different focus methods, I don't remember off the top of my head if there are any changes there. It's not something I have any kind of documentation on, so I can't answer you at this point. Let's see here. Saw a video where the person shook the camera sensor, bounced a lot. Is there a way to lock the sensor when traveling? No, and you actually don't really have to worry about it. I get... it may be a little jarring to think about it, but no, no pun intended there. There's no issue with the sensor moving when the camera's powered off. When it's on, it's held in place, and you'll be really good. Alvarez says, I think I'm pronouncing that right, says, hi, Sean, I would love to see small box around the eye in human eye detection mode. So would I. I would love that. And then the last question for right now says, what can you comment on global shutter ever coming to Lumix? So, first off, I will say it is a very impressive. I think kudos should be shared when cool technology is released. I don't care who makes it. And yes, I do recognize that I'm coming from Lumix here. I think that kind of stuff should be... praised. It's a very cool thing to have. As far as our direction with things like that, I cannot comment on anything that comes to potential or projects that maybe we've worked on. As many of you know, if you do a search, there is a global sensor project that our team has been, or our team is in Panasonic, is working on. It is a different division than us. Aside from what you all know about the white papers and stuff that have been shown and the tech demos that have been made on our side of that world, I know as much as the rest of you do. It's cool technology. I think it's still a little ridiculous to think that a $6,000 plus camera is going to all of a sudden become the de facto standard in the industry. Global sensors, at least in the current iteration, still have lower dynamic range and more noise at a given ISO than a rolling shuttered sensor does. At least that's what the early shows are going with and what historically has been the case. But that is still a really cool thing to see come out. So that's my little kudos to the industry. It's really cool. And others have had global shutter. Those are all Super 35 for the most part. Global shutter is not a new thing, as to say. So just as an effect, global shutter is not a new thing in cameras. Sorry if my question wasn't clear. I understand that super telephotos can achieve the effect. What I mean was just stitching multiples of those shots for wider field of view in camera. Oh, okay. I understand what you were messaging there. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a cool idea to see. I know that there are a couple gadgets out there for mobile devices that are kind of giving you that kind of idea of being able to take multiple frames, kind of like what Gigapixel did years ago when they made a hardware device. Probably not going to necessarily see that in cameras anytime soon because, again, a lot of it, I think, goes down to a lot of us misunderstanding how much processing power cameras have versus what our phones and computers have. Our phones have infinitely more processing power than a camera does. Until something changes and, a camera company decides to go and use, a cell phone processor, which opens up a whole nother world of confusion and challenge there. But yeah. All right. So I wanted to cover a couple more things before we round out the stream today. Because I wanted to make sure that I actually get into these topics. And it's going to be about the burst rates on the G9 Mark II. So, a lot has been said about various different functions and capabilities that we have within our camera for burst rate shooting. And, the comparisons to others out there, I'm not going to talk directly about the comparisons. I encourage you to watch Emily's follow-up video from her trip on Safari. It is an incredibly well-done video that took a lot of time and effort to make. And I think it is an incredibly impartial, solid view of, where the strengths are with these various systems. So yes, I encourage you to go look at that. Full stamp of awesomeness from my personal point of view. Take the Lumix out of it. It was a very enjoyable video to watch. Even I learned a couple of things there. So, back to the point. Burst shooting on the G9 Mark II. By default, the system is going to be set up so that your burst shot 1 is set to high. This is mechanical burst shooting on the G9 Mark II. Then you have burst shot 2. This is going to be, by default out of the box, your electronic shutter burst shooting. Now, you have three options, really. Two options if you're in continuous focus, which, let's face it, the vast majority of us are going to be shooting in continuous focus, so we need the faster speeds here. So, SH60 is our 60 frames per second mode. This means that you are going to get 200 frames, give or take, before the buffer is filled, and you have to repress the shutter for the next round to actually start. Now, contrary to what some are trying to make a point about, you can let the shutter go, press the shutter again, and it will continue shooting until you fill the buffer again, and then you have to let off and press again. I pose this to everybody. How often are you just laying on the shutter at 60 frames per second longer than the equivalent of about 3 seconds worth of shooting to go through all of that number of images? I have never done it. I know a lot of wildlife photographers that don't do it. Because when all of a sudden you now go to the point where you're saying, hey, I now have 400 images of the exact same subject flying through the sky that I have to go through, that's a bigger pain in the ass than it is to shoot a burst, let go, shoot a burst, let go, shoot a burst, let go. Anyway, we do also offer SH20. Now, 20 frames per second, you're still going to get 200 shots, but at 20 frames per second, your duration to photograph is going to be longer. Which means now I can shoot, do a couple bursts, let off the shutter, do a couple bursts, let off the shutter, do a couple bursts, let off the shutter, and run it that way. Then we have SH pre options in this camera. You have 60 pre and 20 pre. 60 pre, which I love how some companies like to think that they're like, oh, we're the first that did this. No, we were kind of one of the first that did this, and then in our 4K, 6K photo mode, and then now we reintroduced it again back in our cameras for standard photo modes here. So what this does is this allows you to have your shutter half pressed and be storing images into the buffer. Now, what's unique about the way we've done this is that you have a half second, so using that 60 frames per second as the benchmark here, that means that I will have 30 frames being held in the buffer while I'm half pressing the shutter. When I press the shutter then, it'll start the 60 frames per second at that burst rate, and it will continue until you hit 200. So you will have a total of 200 images, but the first 30 are going to come from the second you press the shutter and prior to it. Then you have 1 second and 1.5 second. Same deal here. This will just be 60 images stored in the buffer before you press the shutter. This is 90 frames in the buffer before you press the shutter. So you have this to really kind of help make sure that, hey, I want to be able to get this image. I may not have the best reaction time, and I love how it sounded very much like a pitch that I had made in a lot of this. You've got this ability built into the camera. We've had it back in the older cameras. It was 4K, 6K photo. We did pre-burst in those modes. A couple generations didn't have it. Now it's back with full RAW and JPEG. And remember, our camera's doing 16-bit RAW containers for the images, so you are getting full-blown functionality out of this. And this works in the 20 frames per second as well. So that means that I can have 10 frames, 20 frames, or 30 frames being held before I press the shutter. Again, when you are doing this, if you hit the buffer, when you let off the shutter, it's immediately dumping those images to the card, and it's processing through them and sending it out. Now remember, with our system in the electronic shutter, we are also doing rolling shutter compensation. So this is also helping reduce the rolling shutter that you have. Because remember, our sensor doesn't have the negatives that you have with the stacked sensor design, where you have lower noise or worse noise performance in the shadows because you're losing pixel information. You're losing the well capacity in the pixel for stacked. We're able to get really close to the same speed or similar speed that you get on stacked sensors without having to take that penalty. So what we can do there is also run our system for reducing rolling shutter in the image as it's being written and stored to the card. So do we have a little bit longer to write and empty the buffer from full? Yes, not going to hide that. Yes, we are a little bit longer for that. But we're not stopping you from being able to capture when you hit that 200 frame buffer. It's the same exact way that all the other electronic shutter systems work. And then when you go into mechanical burst shooting, which is 10 frames per second, everything's equal. You can keep your finger pressed on this button. Even when you fill the buffer, it just slows the rate down. So it is the same. It just comes down to that, one, we can shoot more photos per burst. We can shoot a faster burst in all of our lenses and our competition's lenses on this camera. You're not limited to recommendations of what lenses work and what lenses may work, which lenses may not work to get the fastest frame. So yeah, lots of flexibility in the burst modes on this camera. That was my whole diatribe there. I'm going to make sure to have that as a separate little segment so people can skip it if they don't want to hear me stand on my soapbox with this. Where do we go? Hap, did Panasonic ever think about opening up parts of the camera operation AF algorithms for the open source community to improve? I don't think you will ever see a camera company do that, because there are things that are there are trade secrets in how various different companies decide to work on their own setup here. Anyone know about live magnification while recording to manual focus? Is it available in the G9 Mark? It's available in the G9 Mark II. You do have punch in while recording. It is the 6 times magnification in video on this camera. What are those other things? Does the G9 Mark II have dual ISO? No, it is a single ISO circuit, but it is a dual, is a dynamic range boost system. So it is always utilizing two two processes of the same frame, one for highlight, one for shadow, merging them together all the way up to 60 frames per second. So it doesn't need the dual ISO manual solution. Okay, cool. So, last two little things, because we're going to be right about on target, that each one of these streams is usually about, you know, an hour and 25 minutes long. I wanted to talk about the other stuff here, which is our kind of a little more specialized features in this camera. So we have Live View Composite in the G9 Mark II. Live View Composite, you want to have the camera in full manual mode. Live View Composite, you then turn it on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my old demo of this where I have a setup here. Excuse me, a setup here. Let's drop the aperture value down. Let's set my shutter speed. We're going to do this to 1 second. ISO 100. What does this image look like? Creating black frame. All right, so this looks really dark, right? So now, what Live View Composite does with our camera is it allows us to take artificial lighting. In this particular case, I'm using artificial lighting. And I can now come through and I can paint with light onto my subject. And it's going to be updating every second in this particular frame. But what this also, so as you can see, you're starting to get some red highlights start to pop in on this particular frame here. But what it also means is that I can come through and say, take this through the frame and actually paint with light. That's a horrible way to paint with that light, so I'm not super happy with that one. But I have the ability. We'll do another one real quick here. We'll do this, and then let me change the intensity down on this. Let's go down to 1% on this light. So again, little aperture MC light. So I can come through, I can start painting with this, adding highlight information, maybe jumping in, adding a little more of that kind of shadow detail added in there where I want it to look. Fill in, add some more red highlights to some of the stuff here. Maybe go in here and get a little bit of a reflection into the actual image there. But then also say I want to come through and I want to sweep a little bit of a red light through it. Again, not the greatest, but you kind of get the point. Live View Composite lets me do this, and you can see that I've been running, this is now a 45-second long exposure. So once I click the shutter button, that exposure is over. When I press playback, now that image is recorded in. Obviously I moved, I'm not being super careful with the way I'm doing this setup here. But I've got the image, it's got the various light painting and highlights that I wanted to add to it, and it's got the light painting on it as well. This lets you do this in camera, and the file that you get out of this is a RAW and a JPEG file. So that means that I have full access to work with this image in post as if it is a standard image. The other area where this becomes very, very useful is in star trail photography. So Live View Composite, this is an image that I took. This is G9 Mark II. This is with the 9mm f1.8 or f1.7. It is a group of 13-second exposures at f2.8 merged using Live View Composite to create this particular look in camera. So then now I can take this, go into Lightroom. In this case, I'm in Lightroom. And I can come through and I can make adjustments for how I want this image to look. And it's full flexibility of the RAW file to work with. So it's a really fun feature to play around with if you've not done it already. Let's see. Any other questions that came in here? Martin says, can we expect that other cameras will get the Godox continuous flash like the G9 Mark II? I think the G9 Mark II has different hardware for the flash, so I'm not sure if previous cameras can get the functionality for it. Yeah, that I'm not 100% sure of, yeah. I see a whole bunch of commentary going back and forth here. That's why I need fast memory cards. Card UHS-2 aren't necessarily expensive. I use cards from Sabrent. Okay. What was going on there? Version 10, I noticed this mention disappeared from the latest publication. Can't wait to see the first tests, though. Okay. Where we go? LHC. I travel a lot on motorcycle and a lot of the time off-road, pretty harsh terrain. I was concerned at some point, wear and tear wise. Okay, I get. Okay, there's other conversations going on. Good. All right. Okay. That's actually about all the time I have for today's stream. There's a lot to talk about still on the G9 Mark II now that the camera is starting to get out into the market, into all of your hands. Again, I encourage you, we have a ton of other live streams up over the last couple of weeks with the G9 Mark II, talking about various features, the capabilities of the camera. I encourage you to go take a look at those videos if you have any interest. They are time-stamped so that you can get in there and play around with it. We also have a number of other videos on S5 Mark II, Mark IIX, General Lumix, all that kind of stuff here on Lumix Live. The entire back catalog. Definitely go take a look at those videos. If you liked the stuff that we covered today, if you liked the information, the camaraderie, the fun chat that everyone has, which is always awesome to see, the fun back and forth with everybody, give us a like. It helps us with these videos. It helps us get more traction and more visibility in the market. If you know people that are interested in this kind of information or want to be part of it, definitely send them our way. Recommend to join us on Lumix Live. Again, it's every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you have comments or questions or things that you just want to tell us that you haven't seen covered on the stream, or maybe we missed during the broadcasts, leave a comment in this video after the stream. It always helps. The more comments on the videos, the better they do in the algorithms, so it's a little self-serving. It helps us get things better. Oh, John, anti-flicker. Sorry. Thank you, John, for bringing that up. I apologize. It was like anti-flicker, flicker. Flash synchro, focus peaking, diffraction, filter settings. I do not see, John, I do not see a dedicated anti-flicker mode in the camera. So let me check with my team, because it's quite possible that it's just built into the way that the system works now. As in the logic for anti-flicker could just be built into the system. But let me take a look at that. I apologize it took me so long to get to that, John. I apologize. Outside of that, again, everybody, thank you so much, everybody. Super Zero battery grip is the BG1 battery grip. That's the one for the... Is it the BG1? I don't have one on my desk. I did, but I don't anymore. So I'll check on that and comment right after I close the stream. Other than that, everybody, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. Comment on the video if you've got recommendations for things in the future and that you want to see, or just comment in general. I encourage you to take a look at the first episode of Lumix Presents Shutter Showdown. It is live on our channel right now. Episode 2 is imminent. Should be available very soon. And programming next week is going to be a pre-recorded stream, as I am actually out on the road for a little bit. So we'll be covering some topics, or general topics, the following week while I am out. And then we'll be back in the studio the following week, working on actually a pretty cool project to try to get some really cool accessories to talk about from Godox, to start talking about some flash work. And other than that, thank you, everybody. Have an awesome rest of your day. Have an awesome weekend. And, I'll catch you in 2 weeks when I'm back from a little getting away from the home office for a little bit. Later, everybody.